The champagne glass nearly slipped from my fingers the moment my sister laughed. It wasn't a quiet laugh. It was loud, sharp, and deliberate, the kind meant to carry across a room and land on every ear at once. "A driver," Courtney said, turning to face the crowd. "You actually married a driver?" The hall went still. Then came the ripple, soft laughter, sideways glances, someone whispering behind a hand. A cousin pressed her lips together. An aunt shook her head slowly. Aaron stood right beside me. He didn't flinch. He just held my hand a little tighter, and I felt the quiet strength in his grip. "And you expect anyone here to take you seriously?" Courtney added, looking me over like I was something she had stepped around on her way somewhere better. I opened my mouth. The words were there. But she cut me off before a single one escaped. "Please, Callie. You've embarrassed this family enough." The room went silent. My name is Callie Monroe. And that night, my family made one thing perfectly clear. I no longer belonged to them. To understand what that night meant, you have to understand what growing up in our house was like. Courtney was the golden child. She had been from the very beginning. She earned the better grades, got the louder praise, and had the bigger birthday parties. When she walked into a room, my parents lit up in a way they never quite did for me. Teachers remembered her name. Relatives asked about her first. I was the other one. The afterthought. The girl who was always almost there but never quite enough. I worked hard in school. I brought home good marks. I tried everything to make them proud. But every achievement I had was held up next to Courtney's and found slightly smaller. The moment I remember most came when I was 12. I had just won a spelling competition and ran home to tell my mother. She smiled faintly and said, "That's nice, honey. Did you hear Courtney made the honor roll again?" I was still holding my little trophy when she said that. Something quiet cracked inside me that day. It never fully healed. I met Aaron in the fall on a Tuesday afternoon when I wasn't looking for anyone. I was an office coordinator at a consulting firm downtown. A client sent a car to collect some documents. Aaron was the driver. He knocked on my office door, calm and unhurried, and asked if I was the one he needed. I said yes. He waited without rushing me, without checking his phone the way most people do. On the drive over, we ended up talking about the city, a song on the radio, small things that somehow didn't feel small. He had a way of listening that made you feel like what you said actually mattered. We exchanged numbers. Then came the calls, the long conversations, and the slow, clear realization that I had never felt this seen by another person in my life. He was kind. He was grounded. He worked hard and never made it anyone else's burden. But when my family found out what he did for a living, every warm thing I felt was met with cold air. "A driver," my father said flatly. Not a question. A verdict. I brought Aaron home for dinner once. Just once. I spent 2 days preparing, picking the right evening, setting the table early, hoping everyone would just be decent for one night. My mother cooked. My father sat at the head of the table with an expression that said he had already decided how things would go. Courtney arrived late, which she always did when she wanted to make an entrance. She looked at Aaron over the way you study something you've already made up your mind about. Then she smiled, that practice smile she used when she wanted to cut someone without leaving a mark, and said, "So, Aaron, do you enjoy opening doors for people?" The table went quiet. No one laughed. But no one said a word either. My father looked at his plate. My mother refilled a glass that didn't need it. Aaron looked at Courtney and said calmly, "I enjoy doing good work. Whatever that looks like. Steady. No embarrassment. No anger. Just quiet dignity." Something tightened inside me right then. Not sadness exactly. Admiration. My family saw a man who drove for a living. I saw someone who would never need to tear another person down to feel tall. My father called me into the living room about 3 weeks after that dinner. Howard never shouted. He never needed to. He spoke in a low, controlled voice that carried more weight than shouting ever could. "If you marry this man," he said, "you will be on your own. Completely." I looked at him. Then at my mother in the doorway, arms folded, eyes on the floor. Then at Courtney, positioned just behind my father like a shadow, arms crossed, expression satisfied. She had pushed for this moment. I could feel it without a word being said. I had always known my family didn't approve of Aaron. But this was different. This was a line being drawn, a door being slammed, A choice being forced on me in the cruelest quiet way possible. I stood there for a long moment. I thought about every year I had spent bending myself into shapes that didn't fit, just to earn some piece of their approval. Then I looked at my father and said, "I'll be fine." I meant it when I said it. But I had no idea what it was going to cost me to find out. Half the seats at my wedding were empty. I had sent 32 invitations to family members. 11 responded. 4 of those who said yes never showed up. Courtney didn't come. No card, no message, nothing. My father arrived late, sat at the back, and left before we cut the cake. My mother sat beside him and said nothing kind to me the whole evening. But Aaron's side was full. His friends from the transportation yard, his 2 sisters, his old neighbor who drove 4 hours just to be there. They laughed and danced and hugged me like I was already one of them. As I was. I stood at the altar and looked out at that room, half cold, half warm, and made a quiet decision inside myself. I was going to stop counting the empty chairs. I was going to look at what was full. That day, I lost the family I had been born into. But I gained something my sister never had and probably never understood. A room full of people who were genuinely, completely happy for me. I held on to that feeling through the first dance and well into all the years that followed. The first 2 years of our marriage were hard. I want to be honest about that. We rented a small apartment on the east side, 2nd floor, thin walls, a radiator that clanked all winter. Aaron worked double shifts 3 nights a week. I picked up weekend work at a retail store on top of my regular job. Some weeks we ate the same meal 4 nights in a row because it was what we could afford. There were evenings when we barely spoke. Not from fighting, just from being bone-tired. We would sit together on our worn couch, shoulders touching, and somehow that quiet felt like enough. What Aaron never did, not once, not even in the worst of it, was make me feel small. He never blamed me for our choices. He never threw our situation at me during an argument. He never made me feel like I was the reason things were hard. On difficult nights he would look at me and say, "We're building something. It just doesn't look like much yet." I held on to those words the way you hold a railing in the dark. The break came in our 3rd year and it came quietly the way most important things do. Aaron had been driving for a mid-sized logistics company for just over a year. He was punctual, careful, and reliable. His manager noticed. Then the regional supervisor did. They began giving him more responsibility. Planning routes, coordinating drivers, stepping in calmly when difficult situations needed someone who wouldn't panic. He was good at all of it. Better than good. One evening he came home with a different energy. His eyes were brighter, like something had switched on behind them. "They want me to manage a fleet of 12 vehicles," he said. "Full-time. With benefits." I stared at him. "Aaron." "I know," he said simply. We stayed up until 2 in the morning going over every detail. He asked what I thought about every part of it because that was who he was, someone who never made a major decision without making sure I was standing inside it with him. That was the first real turning point. Not the loudest one we would have, but it was the truest. It was the moment I saw clearly what my family had never bothered to look for. The idea of starting our own company grew slowly at first, then arrived all at once. Aaron had been managing the fleet for almost 2 years when we began having the real conversations. Late nights at the kitchen table, papers spread out, numbers written and crossed off and written again. We had saved carefully, not a large amount but enough to take one calculated risk. We registered the business on a quiet Thursday morning. A small private transportation service. 2 vehicles. A short list of contacts Aaron had built trust with over the years. It was terrifying. Every day felt like standing on ice that might crack beneath you. Courtney found out through the family. News always traveled whether you wanted it to or not. She passed her reaction through my mother, who passed it along without thinking how it would land. "She says you're playing taxi driver now," my mother told me. I was sitting at my desk surrounded by our first signed client contracts when I heard that. I set the phone down. I looked across the room at Aaron, and we just kept working. About 18 months after we started the company, I made the mistake of attending a family gathering. It was my cousin's engagement party, a loud event at a rented hall in the suburbs. I went because something small and stubborn inside me still hoped things might have changed. They hadn't. An uncle asked what Aaron and I had been up to. A friendly, normal question. Before I could say a word, Courtney cut in from across the table with an easy smile. "They're running a glorified taxi service," she said. "Very entrepreneurial." The people nearby laughed. Not with cruelty, just that light, dismissive kind of laughter that says we don't need to take this seriously. I looked down at my plate. But something was different this time. The laughter landed differently. It didn't sink into me and settle the way it always had. It sort of bounced off the surface and fell away. I realized, quietly, in the middle of that noisy room, that I had stopped needing their approval without ever noticing it had happened. I finished my meal and drove home in complete peace. We didn't talk about our growth. We just grew. That was something Aaron and I had decided without making it a formal rule. We were not going to perform our success for anyone. No announcements, no posts, no calls to report how well things were going. We put everything into the work itself. In our second year of business, we added 4 more vehicles. In our third, we signed 2 corporate clients who needed regular staff transportation. We hired 3 drivers we trusted, then 2 more. Aaron ran operations with a quiet efficiency that made me proud every time I watched him. He knew every driver by name, remembered their schedules, and asked after their families. I handled the finances, the contracts, and the client accounts. I turned out to be sharper at it than I had ever given myself credit for. We moved out of the small apartment and into a house with a real yard and a kitchen with actual counter space. We didn't call anyone to announce it. We just moved in, cooked dinner together, and sat quietly in the middle of something we had built entirely with our own hands. The contract that changed everything arrived in our 4th year of business. A regional supply chain company had been searching for a reliable transportation partner. They had worked with 3 different providers and been let down each time. A mutual contact passed our name along. They came to the first meeting clearly skeptical. 3 meetings later, they signed with us. It was the largest contract we had ever taken on. More vehicles, more drivers, tighter schedules, higher stakes than anything we had managed before. The first week nearly wore us both completely down. But we handled every piece of it. Every delivery on time. Every driver briefed. Every call returned within the hour. At the end of that first month, the company's operations director sent Aaron a short email. He forwarded it to me without a word of setup. It said, "Best transportation partner we've had in 5 years. Looking forward to building this long term." That night, Aaron and I sat at our kitchen table, the same table where every late-night plan had started, and he reached over and took my hand. "We did this," he said. "Not him. Not me. We." I started hearing things about Courtney in the year that followed. It came in pieces, a comment from my mother here, a word from a cousin there. The kind of information that moves quietly through families, even when no one is supposed to be sharing it. Courtney's husband, Glenn, had made a series of serious investment mistakes. Not small ones, the kind that leave real damage. His business had been struggling for over a year. They had quietly refinanced their house. Several of their credit lines had been cut. But on social media, everything still looked perfect. She still posted pictures of weekend trips and pretty brunches. She still spoke about her life with polished confidence. She was performing for an audience that had no idea the curtain was falling. I didn't feel satisfied when I learned all of this. There was no joy in it. What I felt was a tired kind of sadness, the feeling that comes from watching someone walk toward a wall for years and finally hit it. I had loved Courtney once, when we were small and the world hadn't sorted us into separate corners. That version of her felt very far away now. My mother called me on a Wednesday afternoon, about a year after the rumors had started. I almost let it ring. Carol and I had settled into a careful pattern, surface-level conversations, nothing that touched the real distance between us. But something made me answer. Her voice was different from the first word. Softer than I was used to, like the sharp edges had worn down into something tired. "How are you, Callie?" she started. We talked briefly about small things, the weather and neighbors' news. Then she paused. "Courtney's going through a difficult time," she said. I didn't respond right away. I let the words sit between us. I already knew, of course, but hearing Carol say it out loud made it real in a new way. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and I mostly meant it. Another pause. Then quietly, "She may need some help, Callie. From family." I held the phone a little tighter. "I understand," I said, but I didn't say yes. And my mother heard the difference between those two things. Neither of us brought it up again before we said goodbye. Even as her life was unraveling, Courtney didn't reach out. Weeks passed after my mother's call. Then a full month. I had half expected something from her. A text, even a short message acknowledging the distance between us and what had caused it. Nothing came. She was still posting on social media. Carefully chosen images, a pretty cup of coffee, a quote about resilience, a photo from better years. She was still curating a story for people who had no idea what was happening behind it. I understood pride. I had grown up in the same house and knew exactly what it felt like to have something to prove. But there is a difference between pride that holds you steady and pride that blinds you. Courtney had always confused the two. She was struggling. She needed real help. And still she could not bring herself to look at me and see someone worth asking. That told me something important. After all these years, after everything we had both survived, she still saw me the way she always had. Some things I understood then had not changed at all. She showed up on a Saturday morning without any warning. I was in the kitchen when Aaron came in from the yard and said quietly, "Your sister is at the front door." I set down what I was holding and took a slow breath. When I opened the door, Courtney was standing on the porch in a coat that was still nice but slightly worn at the sleeves. She had clearly spent time getting ready, hair done, posture straight, but her eyes gave her away. They held that deep, hollow tiredness that sleep alone cannot fix. She glanced at the house before she looked at me. I caught the quick scan of the yard, the car in the driveway, the new door we had put in last spring. She was taking stock. "Hi," she said. "Hi," I said. A pause. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside and let her through. Not because everything was forgiven. Not because the past had been erased. But because she was standing there and whatever else was true, she was still my sister. I brought her to the living room and sat across from her. I waited. She didn't apologize. That was the first thing I noticed. It settled into me slowly and cold. She sat in my living room and looked around, at the furniture, the photos on the walls, the certificates Aaron had mounted near the door, and then she looked at me and started talking. She listed her problems like someone reading from a prepared document. Glenn's investment losses, the house refinancing, the mounting credit issues, a loan due by end of month or face serious consequences, a second loan taken to cover the first. She spoke in a flat, businesslike tone, as if the situation were unfortunate but manageable, and all that was missing was someone to step in and fix it. That someone was supposed to be me. There was no preamble. No, I know things between us have been hard. No acknowledgement of the dinner, the wedding, the empty chairs, the years of silence and contempt. She just listed what she needed. Like I owed her. Like none of it, not a single moment of any of it, had ever happened at all. While she talked, something strange happened inside me. It wasn't quite anger. It was more like a door swinging open onto a hallway I had kept locked for a long time. Walking down it meant passing every single thing I had tried to leave behind. I remembered standing in that hall with the champagne glass nearly slipping from my fingers. Her voice loud, deliberate, shaped to humiliate. "A driver? You actually married a driver?" I remembered the dinner table. Her practiced smile. "Do you enjoy opening doors for people?" I remembered the empty seats at my wedding. The laughter at the family party. My father near the back of the room, gone before the cake. I remembered the small apartment and the worn couch and the double shifts and the meals stretched 4 nights and the evenings too tired to speak. I had not built what I had built by accident. I had built it through years of hard work and discipline and choosing, over and over, to believe I was worth more than how she had treated me. And now she was sitting here in the middle of everything I had built, waiting for me to hand some of it over. Aaron came into the room while Courtney was still talking. He had heard enough from the hallway to understand what was happening. He came in quietly, sat beside me, and folded his hands in his lap without saying anything yet. Courtney glanced at him, the same brief, dismissive glance she had always given him, as though he were a piece of furniture that had ended up in the wrong room. She kept talking. More numbers, more details, more expectations dressed up as facts. Aaron let her finish. Then in that same calm, steady voice he had used at the dinner table all those years ago, the voice that had never bent under her contempt, he spoke. "Courtney," he said, "every vehicle in our fleet, every contract we hold, every driver on our payroll, Callie and I built all of it. No shortcuts. No one helped us. We started from nothing and built this while carrying the weight of everything your family put us through. He paused. I need you to understand that before we go any further. Courtney's eyes moved briefly to him, then away. She didn't respond. That silence said everything it needed to. She played her final card a few minutes later. When it became clear that neither Aaron nor I was filling the silence with a yes, her manner shifted. The businesslike tone she had arrived with began to soften, or what she wanted to look like softness. We're family, Callie, she said. She looked right at me when she said it. Her voice had changed, quieter, more careful, shaped to reach something. Whatever has happened between us, we are still family. Surely that means something. I had heard that word used like a tool my whole life. Family meant I should shrink. Family meant I should make room. Family meant the people who had made me feel worthless were still owed my loyalty, my silence, and my labor. It was the word my father used when he gave me the ultimatum. It was the word my mother chose on the phone when she asked me to step in for a sister who had never once stepped in for me. And now Courtney was holding it out like a key she believed could open any door, no matter what had come before. I looked at her and said nothing. Not yet. I sat with her words for a long, quiet moment. I looked at my sister, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time in years without the fog of old hurt clouding what I saw. She was tired. She was scared. I didn't dismiss either of those things. But I also saw something clearly. She had not come here because she valued me. She had come because she had run out of other options. I was not her sister in that moment. I was her last resort. And even now, sitting in my living room surrounded by evidence of a life I had built without any of their help, she could not offer a single genuine word of acknowledgement. No apology. No reckoning. No moment where she said, I was wrong about you. I was wrong about him. Just need, dressed in the language of family. I had earned my clarity the hard way. Through years of sacrifice and loneliness and stubborn growth. Through choosing over and over to believe I was worth more than how she had treated me. And now I was completely clear. I did not owe her this. No, I said. Just one word. Quiet, steady, and completely final. Courtney blinked. Her expression shifted. Confusion first, then disbelief, as though she had misheard something simple. Callie. No, I said again just as calmly. We are not doing this. She leaned forward. I'm asking for family. You came here without calling, I said. You sat in my home and listed what you needed without once asking how I was, or what I had been through, or what any of this cost. You haven't apologized. You haven't acknowledged a single thing. My voice stayed level. No raised volume, no sharpness. Just the truth spoken plainly. You had years, I said. Years where you could have reached out differently. Years where you could have been a real sister. You chose not to. I accepted that. I built my whole life around the fact that you weren't going to. Aaron sat quietly beside me. He didn't need to add anything. I'm not angry at you, Courtney, I said. But no. We will not be helping you. The word carried everything in it. Every silent year, every hard choice, every piece of ground I had slowly won back. I meant every syllable. That was when she broke. It happened fast. One moment composed, the next she wasn't. Her jaw tightened, her eyes filled, and then everything came pouring out in a rush she had been holding back far longer than just today. You have no idea what I've been going through, she said, voice rising. You're sitting here in this house with your business and your good life, and you won't help your own sister? There was real anger in it. But underneath the anger was something raw, naked, unguarded panic. I swallowed my pride to come here, she said. I came to you. And you're just going to say no? Yes, I said. That is cruel, Callie. That is genuinely cruel. I didn't argue. I didn't explain again or soften the answer to make it easier to hear. The time for all of that was long past. I let her speak. I let all of it pour out without interrupting once. When she finally stopped, I said quietly, I hope things get better for you, Courtney. I genuinely mean that. No one stepped in to rescue her this time. For the first time in her life, there was no one left who would. She left the way she had always moved through the world. Back straight, chin lifted, but something deep underneath all of it had cracked open. I watched her walk to her car from the front window. She didn't look back at the house. She didn't pause at the curb. She just got in, started the engine, and drove away. I stood there for a moment in the quiet she left behind. I waited for the guilt. That was always what happened, the sharp automatic guilt that hit before I could stop it, even when the person had never once worried about disappointing me. It didn't come. Instead, something else settled in. Something quiet, solid and warm, like sunlight through a window you had kept closed too long. I was free. Not free from her exactly, not from the history or the memory of all of it, but free from the weight of needing her to finally see me differently. From the long, exhausting hope that one day she would understand what she had thrown away. I had been carrying that hope for nearly 20 years. I set it down that afternoon and walked back inside my home. 6 months passed. Through my mother, I heard that Courtney and Glenn had sold the house and moved into something smaller while they worked to rebuild. It wasn't the life she would have written for herself, but it was the one her choices had written for her. Carol called me about a month after Courtney's visit. She didn't bring up what had happened. She asked how Aaron and I were doing. I told her the truth. We were well. The business was growing. We had just signed our largest contract yet. A statewide distribution deal that meant more drivers, more vehicles, and more of the honest, rewarding work we had built our lives around. She said she was glad to hear it. And for the first time in a long time, I believed her. Aaron and I celebrated the way we always had. Dinner at home. A glass of wine at the kitchen table where every plan had started. The woman her family had once mocked, the one who had embarrassed them by choosing a man who drove for a living, had built something lasting and real. Not despite them. In spite of them. And she never needed a single thing from any of them to do it.